Stepmom demands I end my engagement until my stepsister gets married, as I'm deliberately ruining her life. So, here's how this whole mess started. My sister is getting married, and apparently she just assumed that I'd be paying for her wedding venue. Not helping out here and there, not pitching in if things got tight. She wanted me to cover the whole thing. Why? Well, because a few years back, I helped my other sister with her wedding costs, and she thinks it's only fair she gets the same. But not just any venue, mind you. She's got her sights on the priciest, most picturesque spot in town, the kind of place that would drain anyone's wallet. She basically texted me out of the blue with this assumption. No warm-up, no soft approach. It was like, hey, I found the perfect place for the wedding, and since you paid for other sister's reception, I was thinking you'd cover this too. Like it was just the natural next step for me to fork over a ton of cash. And honestly, I thought it was a joke at first, like some weird way to see if I'd laugh or agree. But she was dead serious. I'm looking at this text just baffled, like, is she for real? It wasn't even a request, it was pretty much a demand. And to be clear, it's not like I'm rolling in dough or anything. I helped my other sister because she was in a tight spot, and we all chipped in as a family to make her day special. But there's no way I could just drop thousands on a venue without it seriously affecting my own finances. Plus, the way she asked, it just felt so entitled, like she had this, well, you owe me attitude. So I texted back something like, hey, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to cover this. I tried to be nice about it. I didn't want to start a fight or make it sound like I didn't care, but I also wanted to make it clear that I just couldn't afford to be her personal ATM. Well, that went about as well as you'd expect. Almost immediately, I got this barrage of messages back, each one getting more and more angry. She was saying stuff like, wow, so much for being family. And I guess you only care about other sisters' happiness, not mine. There was even a line about how I'm probably jealous that she's getting married. But what really got me was when she dragged our stepmom into it. My stepmom calls me up not long after, acting like I'm some kind of villain for not supporting my sister. She goes on about how disappointed she is, saying it's my responsibility to step up because I'm the one with a steady job. Meanwhile, my sister's sitting there in the background. I could hear her, probably feeding her lines or nodding along. They're both talking like I'm made of money, like I'm some lottery winner refusing to share the prize. I tried to explain that I'd helped our other sister because she was in a tough spot, and it was never meant to set a precedent where every wedding after that would be on me. But they weren't having it. It didn't matter what I said. They'd made up their minds that I was the bad guy. At one point, my stepmom actually said, if you don't support your sister now, don't expect her to support you when you need it. Like, okay, let's be real here. When have they ever supported me? I've been on my own financially since I could hold a job. After that, I decided to just drop it and move on with my day, hoping they'd calm down and realize how ridiculous they were being. But no. Later that night, I get a notification from a group chat that has our cousins and siblings in it. I figured it was just the usual chatter or someone sharing a funny story, but when I opened it, there's this massive message from my sister. She went on this rant about how she's devastated by how selfish I'm being, and that I promised to help her just like I did for our other sister. She's twisting the story to make it sound like I'm heartless and don't care about her big day at all. Of course, this stirred the pot. Suddenly, other family members are chiming in, asking why I'm refusing to help and what's really going on. I felt like I was being dragged into some family courtroom where I had to defend myself just for saying no. Some of my cousins started messaging me privately, basically going, "What's going on?" or "Why is sister so upset?" And here I am explaining to everyone that I'm not some heartless jerk. I just can't afford to pay for her luxury wedding venue. The funniest part? A few of my cousins actually sided with me, especially the ones who've had their own weddings. They knew what it's like to budget for a wedding, and they couldn't believe the entitlement either. One cousin even messaged me, if she can't afford it, maybe she should pick a cheaper place. Just saying. But of course, my sister ignored that advice and kept acting like I'd ruined her whole wedding. Things got worse the next day when my stepmom called me again. She'd apparently been feeding on my sister's sob story and came back with this full-on lecture about family duty and how I'm supposed to honor commitments. I stopped her right there and said, there was no commitment. I never promised to pay for her venue. I could tell she didn't believe me. It's like she'd already chosen to see me as the villain, and no amount of reasoning would change her mind. Then she dropped the line that really took the cake. She says, "You know, we were hoping you'd step up and be the example here." The example? For what? Going broke so my sister can have her dream wedding? I'm sorry, but if being the example means letting myself get guilt-tripped into paying for things I can't afford, then count me out. I told her, plain and simple, I'm not paying for it. End of story. and I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it, but they kept dragging other family members into it, trying to paint me as the villain who's out to sabotage my sister's wedding. It was wild seeing the lengths they went to, like they were rallying troops for a war against me. They even tried to get my dad involved. But thankfully, he stayed out of it, just saying, "It's her money. She can do what she wants with it." At least someone in the family had some sense. But honestly, after that, I just blocked both of them. I was done being guilt-tripped and attacked over something as insane as this. They acted like I was canceling the wedding myself, just by not wanting to pay for an overpriced venue. All I wanted was some peace and to live my life without being roped into my sister's fantasy. If she really cared about her big day, maybe she'd focus on making it work within her budget instead of turning me into her personal ATM. So a couple months after all the drama over the wedding venue, my boyfriend proposed and I got engaged. It was honestly one of the best moments of my life, and for a few days, I was floating on cloud 9. We were already living together, but this just felt like the next big step, and I couldn't wait to tell everyone. I figured, hey, it's just good news. No big deal, right? Well, turns out I was so wrong. I told my family, posted a few pictures, the usual stuff, and not even a day later, my phone starts blowing up. I see it's my sister, and my first thought is, oh, she's calling to congratulate me. Yeah, I know. In hindsight, I was being way too optimistic. The second I answered, I knew something was off because she was already yelling. I hadn't even said hello before she's screaming at me like I'd done something horrible. She's going on and on about how I'm stealing her thunder. She's yelling so loud that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I'm hearing things like, "How could you do this to me? You know how hard things have been for me, and now you're just rubbing it in my face." I barely got a word in because she was on a roll, calling me selfish and saying stuff like, I'm ruining her life by getting engaged first. She actually said, "You're only doing this now because my wedding didn't happen yet." Like, what? Since when is there a rule that I have to put my life on hold because she's dealing with wedding drama? I told her, "Look, I'm sorry you feel this way, but this is my life, and my engagement isn't about you." I tried to keep it as calm as possible, hoping she'd take a second to chill out and see how irrational she was being. But she kept going, saying I've always tried to one-up her, and that I've got some twisted need to ruin her happiness. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there staring at my fiancé, who's giving me this look like, is this really happening? After that, she started dragging my fiancé into it, saying, "I bet he only proposed because you put him up to it so you could beat me to the altar." I couldn't even respond to that. It was just so ridiculous. She seriously thought I'd manipulated my own engagement just to spite her. I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I wasn't going to let her ruin this for me. So I just told her, "I'm done talking about this," and hung up. A few hours later, I get an email from my stepmom. The subject line is just unbelievable, and I already knew it was going to be bad. I open it, and it's a full-on rant about how I should have waited until after my sister's wedding to get engaged. She actually used the words "stealing her moment," like I was out here plotting to overshadow my sister. She went on about how my sister was having a hard time, and that it was thoughtless of me to add to her stress with my selfish decision. And then, the cherry on top, it's not too late to do the right thing and postpone your engagement announcement. I sat there for a good minute, just staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just read. Postpone my engagement announcement? Like, was I supposed to unget engaged and pretend this never happened just to make her happy? I could not believe the level of entitlement here. I decided not to reply because I knew it had just turned into a whole back and forth, and I wasn't about to get sucked into that. I thought maybe they'd get it out of their system, maybe they'd rant to each other, and that'd be the end of it. Nope, they weren't done. The next day, I found out that my sister had posted this long rant on Facebook. She wrote this dramatic post about how she's always had to deal with selfish people who try to overshadow her, and how certain people were trying to steal her joy during a tough time. She didn't name me directly, but anyone who knew us could tell she was talking about me. A few of her friends even commented stuff like, "You deserve better, and some people just don't know how to be happy for others." And of course, my stepmom was there, leaving hearts and supportive comments, basically fueling the whole thing. My friends started messaging me, asking if I'd seen what she posted. I honestly felt embarrassed because it was just so over the top and petty. One of my cousins, who's been on my side from the beginning, even commented on her post saying, "Isn't it time to move on and let people live their lives?" I got a kick out of that, but it didn't stop her. My sister actually replied with, "You wouldn't understand because you're not a bride." The drama wasn't even close to being over. My sister decided to text me again, saying that I was being disrespectful by ignoring her feelings, and that the right thing to do would be to take a break from social media and let her have the spotlight back. She even suggested that I tell everyone I'd jumped the gun on the engagement and that we were taking it slow to give her some breathing room for her own wedding. I nearly dropped my phone when I read that. I replied, "I'm not doing any of that. This is my life, and I'm allowed to be happy without it being about you." I thought maybe she'd back down, but she didn't. She went on another rant, saying that if I really cared about family, I'd support her instead of making everything about myself. At that point, I was done. I'd tried to be polite, I'd tried to be understanding, but she was just dragging me through the mud for no reason. I told her, "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not going to put my life on hold because you're unhappy. If you want to act this way, fine, but I'm done engaging with it." And then I blocked her. I thought blocking her would bring some peace. But then my stepmom started texting me, accusing me of being cold-hearted and abandoning family during important moments. She said, "You're turning your back on your sister when she needs you most." It was guilt-tripping 101, and I wasn't falling for it. I left her on read and blocked her too. For a while, things were quiet. I got a few messages from cousins who'd seen my sister's Facebook rant and wanted to know if I was okay. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, so I just told them, "It's all just drama, don't worry about it." But deep down, I was frustrated. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life, and instead, I was dealing with family members trying to ruin it because they couldn't handle my happiness. I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I was. I'd always known my sister could be dramatic, but this was a whole new level. All I wanted was to enjoy my engagement, share it with people who cared, and start planning my future. Instead, I got dragged into a soap opera that I never asked to be a part of. At the end of the day, I decided to focus on the people who were genuinely happy for me and forget about the ones who weren't. I wasn't going to let my sister or my stepmom steal this joy from me, no matter how hard they tried. After blocking my sister and stepmom, I thought that would be it. I really thought, okay, they'll cool off and maybe they'll realize how ridiculous they're being. But nope. If anything, blocking them only added fuel to the fire. The next thing I know, I'm getting calls and texts from other family members, all asking me the same thing. What's going on? At first I was confused because I hadn't told anyone about the argument, and I figured that they'd respect my privacy. But I was wrong. My sister, with the help of my stepmom, decided to take her complaints public. And I don't mean a casual rant to a few people. No, they went on a full-blown smear campaign against me. It started with my aunt. She's pretty close with my stepmom, so I wasn't shocked to hear from her. But instead of asking me what happened, she went right into accusing me. She texted me, "I can't believe you'd treat your sister like this. She needs your support, not this cold-hearted behavior. Don't you care about family?" And the worst part? She added, "I didn't expect this from you." Like somehow I'm this monster for not putting my life on hold for my sister's wedding drama. I tried to explain my side, but she just wasn't interested. She'd already made up her mind that I was in the wrong, thanks to whatever story my sister and stepmom cooked up. After that, it was like one relative after another started messaging me. I was getting calls from cousins, texts from uncles, even a few family friends asking, "Why are you being so mean to your sister? Why can't you just wait until after her wedding?" They all had this version of the story where I was the villain who had stolen her moment and abandoned her during a difficult time. The worst part was realizing just how twisted my sister's version of the story must have been. She and my stepmom apparently told everyone that I'd made some kind of promise to hold off on my engagement announcement until she got married. They claimed I'd broken a family pact and was only out to sabotage her happiness. Honestly, it was so far from the truth that it was laughable. Except, it wasn't funny at all. One of my cousins, who's usually pretty level-headed, reached out and asked if we could talk. I agreed because she seemed to genuinely want to understand what was going on. She asked, "So, what's this about you agreeing to delay your engagement for your sister?" And I had to take a deep breath because, wow, I did not agree to anything like that. I explained to her, there was never any promise or pact. I didn't agree to postpone anything for her. And it's pretty messed up that she's spreading that lie. My cousin listened and seemed to understand, but even she was like, "I get it, but you know how your sister is. Maybe if you'd just waited a few months, this whole thing wouldn't have blown up." And that's when it hit me. My sister had managed to get everyone thinking that it was my responsibility to avoid upsetting her, no matter how unreasonable she was being. I started feeling like I was under siege. Everywhere I turned, someone else was ready to believe the worst about me based on whatever twisted story my sister was telling. It got to the point where I didn't even want to check my phone because I knew there'd be another text or missed call waiting. And it wasn't just direct family. Even extended relatives who I barely talked to were chiming in with opinions on my behavior. It felt like I was the star of some family gossip show that I didn't sign up for. Then I got a call from my grandmother, who's usually a very calm, neutral person. She asked if I could come by to talk things over, and I could tell by her voice that she was genuinely concerned. So I went over to her place, hoping this would be a chance to clear things up once and for all. When I got there, she looked at me with this disappointed expression, like she just didn't understand what was going on. She asked, "Why didn't you just wait? Your sister is very hurt by all this. She's saying you promised to wait until her wedding was settled." I felt so defeated, but I calmly told her, "Grandma, I never promised anything. I didn't agree to wait, and I had no idea that announcing my engagement would lead to all this drama." She listened and nodded, but I could see she was still conflicted. She said something like, "You know how emotional your sister can be. Maybe she really thought you would hold off for her." And while I could see her point, I couldn't help but feel frustrated. It was like everyone was bending over backward to make excuses for my sister's behavior, while I was just expected to sit there and take it. By this point, the whole situation was draining me. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, my sister would find a new way to throw me under the bus. She even went as far as telling people that I had purposely gone low contact with her because I couldn't stand to see her happy. She was framing it like I was the petty, jealous sister who couldn't handle her joy. It was wild to me how far she was willing to go just to make me look bad. And what hurt the most was that people believed her, or at least they weren't willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. Even people who'd known me my whole life seemed to be buying into this idea that I was the villain in her story. At one point, my fiancé suggested we post our side of the story on social media to set the record straight. But honestly, I didn't want to stoop to that level. I felt like doing that would only add fuel to the fire, and knowing my sister, she'd probably find a way to twist it into more drama. Instead, I just decided to pull back and focus on my own life. I told the people who were willing to listen what really happened, and for everyone else, I figured they'd believe what they wanted. As days passed, things slowly started to quiet down. I still got the occasional side-eye or passive-aggressive comment from a few relatives, but I think people were starting to realize how ridiculous the whole thing was. My sister eventually stopped her smear campaign, or maybe she just ran out of people to talk to. Either way, I was done letting her mess with my life. The whole experience was a wake-up call for me, though. I realized that no matter how hard you try to be reasonable, some people are just set on creating drama and dragging you down with them. And honestly, if that's how she wanted to play it, then I was more than happy to let her go off on her own. I had an engagement to enjoy, a life to plan, and real friends and family who knew the truth and actually cared about my happiness. In the end, I decided that if anyone still believed her side of the story, that was on them. I was done defending myself to people who weren't willing to see the bigger picture. My sister's version of events might have painted her as the victim, but I knew the truth, and so did the people who really mattered to me. So I let it go and moved forward with my life, leaving her drama where it belonged, firmly in the past. So after the whole smear campaign finally started dying down, I thought things would go back to normal. My sister had been quiet for a while, probably worn out from spreading her side of the story to anyone who'd listen. I was actually starting to relax and enjoy my engagement without all the noise. But I should have known that peace wouldn't last long. One evening I was hanging out with my fiancé, just going over some ideas for our wedding plans. Nothing huge, just some casual brainstorming about venues and dates. I hadn't even posted anything about it or shared it with family yet. We were honestly just talking through ideas to get a feel for what we both wanted. And that's when my phone started buzzing like crazy. At first I thought maybe something had happened to a friend or someone in the family, so I picked it up quickly. I barely even had the phone in my hand before it started ringing with my sister's name flashing on the screen. My fiancé and I exchanged a look because we both knew this wasn't going to be a friendly call. But hey, I was curious. Maybe she'd calmed down and was finally ready to act civil, right? Wishful thinking. I answered, and immediately she was screaming at me. Not talking, not arguing, but full-on screaming. She was yelling about how she'd heard we were planning our wedding, and how it was unbelievable that I'd even consider setting a date before she'd gotten the chance to have her own wedding. I hadn't even told her anything about the date, but that didn't stop her from accusing me of rubbing it in her face and deliberately trying to ruin her life. She kept saying things like, "You're trying to take everything from me. And this was supposed to be my year." I was stunned. She was acting like me planning my wedding was a personal attack on her. I tried to get a word in to calm her down, But every time I started talking, she'd cut me off with another accusation. She was saying things like, "You just can't stand to see me happy," and "You're obsessed with making everything about you." And honestly, the whole time, I was just sitting there, listening, with my jaw hanging open because it was so bizarre. I didn't even know where to start. Then she took things to a whole new level. She actually accused my fiancé of being in on it, saying he was only proposing because I pressured him, and that we were both ganging up on her to steal her happiness. She said, "I bet you only planned this wedding just to mess with me. You don't even love him. You just want to be the center of attention." At that point, I'd had enough. I handed the phone over to my fiancé, and he just calmly told her, "Look, our relationship has nothing to do with you. We're happy, and that's all there is to it." But she wasn't having it. She kept going on, and by then her voice was just one big, angry mess of noise. My fiancé finally just told her, "We're not discussing this anymore," and hung up. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Not even close. About an hour later, she started blowing up my phone again. She left this series of voicemails, each one worse than the last. The first one was her ranting about how selfish I was and how she couldn't believe I would do this to her. The second one was a whole monologue about how I was ruining her life and that I'd regret trying to steal her happiness. By the time I listened to the third one, she was sobbing, going on about how I was breaking her heart and how I was destroying our family. It was actually sad to hear, but at the same time, I couldn't believe how far she was taking this. I wanted to call her back, to somehow reason with her, but after everything, I knew that'd only make things worse. There was no way to rationalize with someone who was that deep into her own story of being the victim. And then she took it to a new level of petty. She decided to call our dad. Yep, she went straight to him, probably hoping he'd talk some sense into me, or something. Next thing I know, I'm getting a call from my dad. And to his credit, he wasn't angry or accusatory. He just sounded exhausted. He told me, "Your sister is very upset. She thinks you're doing this on purpose to hurt her." I could tell he was just done with the whole situation too. I explained everything to him, told him how none of this was planned around her or meant to steal anything from her. He sighed and said, "I know that, but she's not seeing it that way." He basically admitted he didn't have the energy to argue with her about it anymore, which I understood. I told him I didn't expect him to take sides, but I also wasn't going to apologize for moving forward with my life. That was it, or so I thought. I was prepared to just keep my distance and move on, but my sister wasn't letting go. She started spreading more lies, this time telling people that I'd stolen her original wedding date, even though she didn't have one set. She claimed I'd found out her dream venue and tried to book it out from under her, which was ridiculous because she hadn't even picked a venue yet. She was out here making up stories just to get people on her side. The worst part was that some family members actually believed her. I had a few cousins reach out saying things like, "I heard you booked venue name, is that true?" I had to keep clearing up the mess she was creating. I told them, "No, that's not true. I didn't even pick a venue yet." It felt like every day was just another round of rumors I had to squash, like she was playing some game to see how far she could push things. Finally, I got tired of the whole thing and decided to just start blocking people. I blocked her, I blocked anyone who kept trying to feed me her lies. And I told my friends and close family what was really happening, so I didn't have to keep explaining myself. I was done with it. I wanted my life back, without all her drama dragging me down. In the end, I realized that her meltdown wasn't about me or my engagement. It was about her not being able to handle her own insecurities and feeling like she was losing control of her moment. And instead of dealing with that, she decided to make me the villain in her story. But I wasn't playing along anymore. So, I let her scream, cry, and throw whatever tantrum she wanted, but I wasn't going to keep listening. I had my own life to focus on, and that was exactly what I planned to do. If she couldn't handle that, well, that was her problem, not mine. After all that went down, I decided enough was enough. Blocking my sister, stepmom, and a few family members who were still stuck in her twisted version of events was honestly the best decision I could have made. I knew it would stir up even more drama, but at this point, I didn't care. I was tired of defending myself. Tired of feeling like I had to explain my every move. I just wanted peace. Blocking them didn't exactly solve everything overnight, though. My sister wasn't done, not by a long shot. She couldn't get to me directly, so she resorted to posting vague, bitter stuff online. Every other day, she was sharing passive-aggressive quotes like, "Some people are just so self-centered they'll ruin your life without a second thought, and blood doesn't make you family, loyalty does." You know, the classic attention-seeking type of stuff that's supposed to make people ask, what happened? Friends started messaging me screenshots of her posts, and some family members even reached out saying things like, "Are you guys okay?" Or, "I'm worried about your sister, she seems really upset." I didn't reply to any of them. The way I saw it, anyone who truly wanted to know the real story already knew. And if they believed her one-sided pity party over actually talking to me, then I didn't need them around either. Eventually, people started moving on, realizing that her posts were just the same drama recycled over and over. It's like they got tired of her constant negativity. Family members stopped bringing it up, and the friends who saw the whole mess for what it was decided to let it go, too. I finally felt like I could breathe. A few months went by, and my fiancé and I kept busy with wedding planning and work. Life was actually pretty good. I was finally able to focus on the things that made me happy, without that dark cloud of drama hanging over my head. For the first time in ages, I felt genuinely excited about the future. We were building something together, and it was amazing. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from my dad. He'd been quiet through most of the drama, but now he wanted to meet up. He said he thought it was time we all sat down as a family and talked things through, maybe tried to fix what was left of the relationship. I didn't blame him for wanting to fix things. He's always been a peacemaker. But I told him straight up that I wasn't interested in rehashing the whole thing with my sister and stepmom. I was done. To my surprise, he actually respected that. He told me he understood, that he just wanted me to know he'd be there if I ever changed my mind. And that meant a lot. It felt good to know at least one person in my family was willing to accept my decision without trying to drag me back into the chaos. Around that time, my sister must have figured out that no one was really buying her story anymore. I started hearing less about her posts and bitter messages, and apparently, she even stopped going to family gatherings as much. I'd be lying if I said I felt bad for her, though. This whole mess was her doing, and she was just facing the consequences of her own actions. If people were distancing themselves from her, that was on her, not me. And you know what? The distance was actually good for everyone. Without her around to stir the pot, family events became enjoyable again. I could actually go to a gathering and not feel like I was walking into a battlefield. People stopped taking sides and just focused on being a family. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted. As for my sister, from what I've heard, she's been keeping to herself more, only really talking to our stepmom. She's still bitter, still posting the occasional passive-aggressive quote, but it doesn't have the same impact. People have mostly stopped paying attention. It's like she finally ran out of steam. I guess there's only so much drama people are willing to tolerate before they realize it's not worth their energy. Looking back, I feel like this whole mess taught me a lot about boundaries. Growing up, I always felt responsible for keeping the peace, for making sure everyone was happy. But that's just not possible, especially when people are so wrapped up in their own egos. My sister was never going to be satisfied no matter what I did, and finally accepting that and letting go of any need to please her was honestly freeing. Now I'm fully focused on the good stuff. I've got a wedding to plan, a partner who's genuinely supportive, and friends and family who actually care about my happiness. I'm done worrying about people who just want to bring me down. If they can't handle seeing me happy, then that's on them, not me. And while it's sad that things turned out this way, I feel like I'm in a better place now. My life is drama-free, and I'm surrounded by people who actually lift me up instead of tearing me down. It's a relief, honestly. No more back and forth, no more rumors or guilt trips, just peace. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm finally moving on, and it feels amazing. I didn't realize just how much my sister's negativity was weighing me down until I cut her out. Now, I'm free to focus on what matters, building a life with my fiancé, creating memories that actually make me smile, and keeping the people close who genuinely support me. If my sister ever comes around and wants to talk things through, I'll listen. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm definitely not putting my life on hold for her. This whole experience showed me that I deserve to be happy, and I'm not letting anyone take that away from me again. Update. Just when I thought the drama had finally settled, my stepmom decided to give it one last shot. Out of nowhere, I got this long, guilt-trippy message from her. It started out all sweet, asking how I was doing, how wedding plans were coming along, and then, boom, right back into the "you should reach out to your sister" routine. She went on and on about how family is everything, and how my sister was struggling without me. According to her, it was my responsibility to make things right. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the same tone she'd used 100 times before to pressure me into doing things her way. But I knew better this time. Her version of making things right wasn't about healing or moving forward. It was about getting me back in line so my sister could feel better about herself. She even hinted that I should invite my sister to the wedding, saying this could be the perfect way to bring the family back together. I wasn't having it. I replied, telling her straight up that I was happy with my choices and that my focus was on people who actually supported me. I told her I didn't appreciate the manipulation or the guilt tripping, and that if my sister wanted to fix things, she could reach out to me herself, without the middleman. Her response was classic stepmom. More drama and, of course, more guilt. She accused me of throwing away my family and giving up on the people who'd always been there for me. It was as if she hadn't learned a thing. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I told her that I was done with these games, that I'd spent too long bending over backward to make everyone else happy, and that my wedding day wasn't some therapy session to patch up old wounds. I said it calmly but firmly, making it clear that I was sticking to my boundaries, no matter what she thought. A few hours later, my dad called. He said he'd heard about my conversation with my stepmom and just wanted to check in. I explained everything, and he actually understood, saying he'd try to talk to her about leaving it alone. It felt good to have him on my side, even if he was caught in the middle of all this. I knew he didn't want to take sides, but I appreciated his support all the same. In the end, that final attempt didn't change anything for me. If anything, it just reinforced how important it was to set those boundaries. My sister and stepmom could either learn to respect that, or they could deal with it on their own. I wasn't letting their issues pull me down anymore. This was my life, my happiness, and I wasn't about to sacrifice that for anyone.